Every night after waking up, Elisa prepares dinner and takes food to her neighbor, who is a failed painter. As she can't communicate with her voice, the woman doesn't have many friends, and Gil is one of the few people in her social circle who can understand her through sign language. After spending some time with him, Elisa walks to the bus stop and takes a van to her workplace. When she gets there, she meets Zelda, one of her best friends, and together the two of them start cleaning all the rooms in the laboratory at night. That day, Mr. Fleming, head of security, makes an announcement in front of the entire team. He reveals that T4 is about to receive a new specimen, which will be the most valuable asset ever to pass through that laboratory. Seeing the water cylinder coming into the room, Elisa is curious to know what's inside and goes closer to have a look. At this point, the unknown creature begins to struggle and the team of scientists rush to take the cylinder to the compressor. When dawn breaks, Elisa leaves work and heads home. When she arrives at the bus stop, she meets Gil, who is waiting for his neighbor to go to the nearest bakery to buy breakfast. Every day, Elisa lives the same routine as always, but sometimes she has to deal with certain surprises at work. The next day, while cleaning the corridors with Zelda, the woman hears some shots and sees Strickland coming out of one of the laboratories. At this point, she realizes that his hand is covered in blood and moves away so that the medical team can help him. Minutes later, when the pair are in the cafeteria, Mr. Fleming appears and asks Elisa and Zelda to accompany him to one of the laboratories. When they get there, they find the floor covered in blood and try to understand what happened. While cleaning up, Elisa finds some human fingers on the floor and decides to keep them in a paper bag while Zelda goes out to ask for help. While alone in the laboratory, the woman comes across the aquatic creature that was trapped inside the cylinder and discovers that the specimen is injured. At dawn, when she returns home, Elisa eats cereal in Gil's apartment while watching TV. After having his coffee, the painter leaves the house with his newest work of art under his arm, and says that when he manages to sell it, his neighbor will be able to choose the gift she wants. The next day, when she arrives at work, Elisa sneaks into the laboratory where the amphibian man is being kept and discovers that he is now trapped by a chain inside a tank. Cautiously, the woman sits on the edge of the pond and offers the creature a hard-boiled egg. As it doesn't trust humans, the specimen tries to scare her, so when Elisa moves away, it takes the food and dives again. A few minutes later, Elisa and Zelda are summoned to Strickland's office and the man thanks the women for finding his fingers. According to him, it took 3 hours of surgery to reconstruct them and there is still no way of knowing if his tendons will work again. At that moment, the man notices that Elisa has a scar on her neck and Zelda reveals that her friend has had that mark since she was a child. After a few minutes of conversation, Strickland decides to get straight to the point and reveals that from that moment on, Zelda and Elisa will be solely responsible for cleaning that room. As soon as they have finished cleaning, they should leave without having any contact with the amphibian, as it is very dangerous. The man says that he found the thing next to a river in South America, and since it was taken from its place of origin, the creature has become extremely aggressive. According to him, for some reason the natives of the Amazon rainforest consider the individuals of that species to be gods of nature, but Strickland sees them only as aberrations. Even so, Elisa insists on continuing to try to get close to the specimen, and the next day, as well as taking a boiled egg, the woman puts on a record while she eats her snack by the pond. Little by little, the amphibious man gets closer, and over time, Elisa manages to win his trust. Weeks later, the two have become great friends, and through sign language, the woman shows him how humans live. One day, while the cleaner is cleaning the laboratory, she ends up being caught by Dr. Robert, who is confused when he notices the sudden closeness of Elisa and the creature. When he realizes that the specimen is able to communicate with humans, Robert pays Miralkovi a visit and says that they need to come up with a plan to capture the amphibian man as soon as possible. The next day, when she arrives at work, Elisa takes advantage of her break to sneak into the laboratory and deliver the boiled eggs to the creature. But when she got there, the woman was startled to see her friend chained up and with wounds all over his body. Immediately, she runs to try to help the specimen free itself, but ends up dropping one of the eggs on the ground. Looking away, Elisa spots the stick being used to hurt the creature, but before she has a chance to grab it, Strickland appears and the cleaner has to hide. After taking the stick, the man starts shouting at the monster and tries to provoke it. Then, every time the amphibian reacts, Strickland uses the stick to electrocute it and Elisa despairs when she hears her friend's screams. During the attacks, Strickland looks on the ground and finds one of the eggs that the woman accidentally left behind, and realizes that someone is feeding it. Just then, General Hoiti appears and is surprised to see the humanoid specimen that the scientists have captured. Seeing a large amount of blood scattered around the room, Robert asks why such cowardice and Strickland says that he is trying to tame that animal. According to Robert, This creature is capable of alternating between two totally independent breathing mechanisms, so it is important study material and should be treated correctly. When he realizes that the creature is seriously injured, the scientist tries to convince Strickland to take it back to the water, but the man is in favor of opening the body of the thing that is still alive. Suddenly, the amphibian collapses and Robert orders his assistants to put him in the tank so that he can recover. Fearful for the specimen's future, the scientist tells Hoichi that under no circumstances can he eliminate the animal, but the general says he can do whatever he wants. After hearing the whole conversation, Elisa follows the scientist closely to find out what has been decided about her friend's future and discovers that the amphibian's life is at risk. Then, when she gets home, she tells her neighbor what happened and asks for his help to get him out of that laboratory. However, knowing the risks involved in this decision, Gil refuses to help Elisa and advises her to abandon this idea, because if she is caught breaking the law she will go to jail. Seeing his friend suffering when faced with the possible fate of the aquatic humanoid, Gil is touched and tempted to help her, but deep down he knows that his life will end up being destroyed if he decides to get involved in this rescue plan. However, after a stressful day trying to sell his painting without any success, Gil returns home and realizes that the only concrete thing he has built in his life is his friendship with Elisa. So the man decides to take a risk to help her complete her plan, because he realizes there's not much to lose. Meanwhile, Robert, who is a Russian scientist infiltrating the laboratory, goes to talk to Miralkovi about General Hoiti's decision, and tells him that they need to rescue the creature that night. However, Miralkovi claims that this is a very risky plan, and reveals that it would take a week for the rescue plan to be put into practice. On discovering that the creature's internal analysis is scheduled to take place the following day, the old man decides that the only option is to eliminate the specimen with an injectable liquid. The idea is to prevent the US Army from using it as a guinea pig, as this could result in discoveries that would give them an advantage over Russia. However, Robert disapproves of this idea, as he knows that this choice goes completely against his values and would only slow down the progress of science. The next day, just before the process of opening the creature begins, Elisa starts to put her rescue plan into practice, and Zelda realizes that her friend is acting suspiciously. As well as Zelda, Strickland is also keeping an eye on the cleaner via the security cameras, and knocks over a glass of water to use as an excuse to call her into his office. When she gets there, Elisa is surprised by a strange conversation with the lab's new head of security, who, despite being married, confesses that he is very attracted to her. Frightened by the insinuations, the woman grabs her things and leaves, because it's almost 5 a.m. and Gil is about to drive up in the cargo compartment to carry out the rescue. While she is defocusing the security cameras, Robert breaks into Strickland's room and tries to convince him to delay the procedure. At that moment, the scientist sees through the screens that the focus of the camera is being altered and tries to distract Strickland so that he doesn't realize what is happening. After leaving the room, Robert walks to the laboratory and his suspicions are confirmed when he sees Elisa helping the amphibian out of the tank. However, instead of telling security, the man decides to help her free the specimen, and stands watch while the cleaner takes the creature to the loading dock through the service tunnels. When she realizes that her friend hasn't shown up on time to leave, Zelda gets worried and decides to clock in instead. Meanwhile, Elisa enlists Robert's help to hide the creature under a pile of warm cloths. The scientist then takes the opportunity to give the woman some tips on water maintenance and feeding so that she can meet all the specimen's needs. The man then uses a device to knock out the power to the entire building and says that Elisa will have about 10 minutes to leave before his presence is noticed. At that moment, Strickland realizes through the security cameras that a suspicious vehicle is trying to enter the building and rushes there to investigate. As she is going through the tunnels, Elisa comes across Zelda and the woman soon realizes what she is doing. Worried about what will happen to her friend if she is discovered, Zelda tries to stop her, but when the lights go out, the cleaner realizes that there is no turning back and decides to help Elisa. Seconds before Gil is arrested by one of the security guards, Robert appears and uses a tranquilizing liquid to put the guard out. The scientist then says that Elisa is waiting for Gil on the pier and orders him to hurry. When he comes across the amphibian, Gil is paralyzed with fear, but soon realizes that it is not a threat and allows the specimen into his van. As the vehicle is about to leave the garage, Strickland appears and starts shooting, but Gil hits the gas and manages to get away before anyone is hurt. Realizing that his car has been destroyed during the escape, Strickland is furious and his anger only increases when he discovers that the creature has been taken. Minutes later, Elisa arrives home and enlists the help of her neighbor to take the amphibious man to the bathtub. At that moment, she remembers Robert's words and puts salt in the water so that the creature can breathe. When he learns that the monster has been taken, General Hoiti calls Strickland and pressures him to find it. That morning, Elisa pays a visit to the city canal that leads to the ocean, and decides to wait until the 10th of the following month to release the specimen. The reason is that the rains will start soon, so the canal is full enough for the creature to swim out to sea. The next day, when she arrives at work, Elisa realizes that a large team has been hired to investigate the disappearance of the amphibian, and Zelda begins to worry. Later, the two cleaners are called to Strickland's office for questioning, but they end up being cleared because the records show that they clocked in before the incident. While his neighbor is at work, Gil stays in his apartment to keep an eye on the specimen and takes advantage of his free time to make a faithful drawing of its features. However, sometime later, when Gil decides to stop for a nap, the monster gets out of the bathtub and starts walking around the house. While exploring the place, he comes across a cat and ends up being frightened by it. Soon after, Gil wakes up and realizes that his feline has been devoured. Press F for the poor kitten. Furious, the man starts shouting at the creature, which gets scared and decides to run away, leaving a scratch on Gil's arm. When she gets home and finds out what's happened, Elisa panics, but her neighbor says he's fine and advises her to go out and look for the wild animal before it causes any more trouble. At this point, Elisa runs to the movie theater below her building and breaks into one of the theaters, where she finds the amphibian standing there staring at the screen. With care and patience, the woman approaches the creature and convinces it to return to the apartment. When she arrives, Elisa teaches her friend how to get along with Gil's cats and helps her neighbor bandage his arm. Repentant for what he has done, the amphibian tries to apologize to the painter for the attack, and the man says he is forgiven. As a way of compensating Gil for the injury to his arm, the creature decides to use its powers to heal him, and as its hands touch the human, the scales covering his body begin to glow. A short time later, Gil realizes that the scratch on his arm has disappeared, and he finally understands why the natives of the Amazon worship this being as if he were a god. Later, before going to sleep, the specimen invites Elisa to join him in the bathtub, and at first the woman refuses the invitation. However, after thinking about it for a few minutes, she decides that there is no problem and ends up falling in love with the creature. The next day, at work, Zelda notices that her friend is happier than usual and is surprised when Elisa tells her the details of what happened. That morning, Robert receives a visit from Miralkovi and his security guard at his house, and realizes that they are armed. After sitting down, the old man asks what the scientist did with the creature's body after injecting the liquid that would make its organs stop working, and Robert says that he did an internal analysis to study the amphibian's body. In an attempt to defend himself, if necessary, he hides a knife behind his back, but to his surprise, Miralkovi ends up believing the lie, and instead of attacking him, the old man just gets up and leaves. In the evening, after dinner with his family, Strickland gets into his car and realizes that the fingers on his hand, which had been relocated by surgery, have not returned to working as expected. Instead, the limbs are looking like zombies and smelling horrible because of the infection. Meanwhile, Elisa is at home with her new romantic partner and decides to flood the bathroom so that they have more space to be together. What the woman didn't imagine when she did this was that the floorboards in her apartment would begin to leak, affecting the customers of the cinema on the first floor. As soon as he identifies the problem, the landlord goes up to the building and starts knocking on Elisa's apartment. Hearing the noise, Gil tries to calm Mr. Arzamanian down and says that he will solve the problem. As soon as he enters his neighbor's apartment, he realizes that Elisa is locked in the bathroom with the creature, and opens the door, causing the water to spread throughout the house. At this point, Gil looks into the room to check that his friend is all right and sees Elisa hugging the specimen. When the rainy season finally begins, the woman feels relieved that the creature will soon be able to leave. As the days go by, the amphibian man feels weaker and gradually his body begins to waste away, which makes Elisa extremely worried. Impatient with the disappearance of the most valuable specimen the country has ever found, General Hoiti pays Strickland a visit to warn him about what will happen to his career if he doesn't find the creature in the next 36 hours. When October 10th arrives, Elisa is confronted by the pain of loss, because she knows that she will soon have to say goodbye to her great love. As she looks at the amphibious man she has fallen in love with, the woman imagines herself dancing with him in public, without having to hide, but deep down she knows that this love would never be accepted by society. That rainy night, Strickland decides to lie in wait in front of Dr. Roberts' house, as he is convinced that he is involved in the disappearance of the amphibian. Seeing him leave the house, Strickland decides to follow him and sees the scientist being shot by Miralkovi's security guard, who has set a trap to eliminate him. At this point, Strickland springs into action and shoots the men. He then begins to attack his co-worker in order to gather information about the men who captured the specimen. When faced with the pain caused by Strickland, Robert ends up handing over the cleaners as the ones responsible for capturing the thing. Immediately, Strickland goes to Zelda's house, who is preparing dinner for her husband, and knocks on the door. When she comes face to face with her boss, the woman is terrified and put against the wall to reveal the whereabouts of the amphibian man. During the interrogation, Strickland removes his zombie fingers and screams in pain, leaving Zelda even more frightened. Seeing his wife being threatened, Brester decides to tell the truth and reveals that he overheard Zelda talking to Elisa about the creature. After discovering the whereabouts of the specimen, Strickland thanks him for the information and goes after Elisa to recover the guinea pig. As soon as the man leaves, Zelda is furious with her husband and calls her friend to warn her about Strickland's arrival. Thanks to this, Elisa manages to leave with her boyfriend before Strickland breaks into her apartment. Realizing that the creature has managed to escape, the man begins to search the house for any clue as to where the monster might be, and finds a note that Elisa has made in the calendar. As soon as the woman says goodbye to the amphibian and prepares to leave with Gil, Strickland appears and shoots the creature. After knocking it down, the man shoots Elisa and the woman faints. Seeing her friend on the ground, Gil hits Strickland with a piece of wood and runs to help her friend. At that moment, the specimen's scales begin to glow and it manages to heal from the wound caused by the bullets. Furious, the creature approaches Strickland and uses its claws to strike his enemy in the neck. Suddenly, the police show up at the scene along with Zelda, who is worried to discover that her friend is injured. Hoping that Elisa might still survive, Gil asks the amphibian to take the woman's body with him, and they both jump into the water. After the dive, the creature spots the scars on Elisa's neck, and through a tender kiss, the amphibian man uses his powers to turn those marks into gills. The next minute, the woman who was about to lose her life starts breathing through the new structure that has formed in her neck, and discovers that, as well as being cured, she now has the ability to breathe underwater. In this way, the couple discovers that they will be able to live a great love, which in the view of humans is completely reprehensible, but for them is all that matters. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you next time.